Welcome to the Positively Star Wars Senate podcast. This is Obi-Wan Kenobi. May the Force be with you.
Looky, Senator. Decent Jedi arriving.
Let's make this our best show ever.
I will sign no treaty, Senator.
I am the Senate.
This is the way.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Positively Star Wars Senate podcast. I'm doing this opening this week because our Chancellor is out enjoying the coronation of his new Chancellor. Have fun with that.
Long live the Supreme Leader.
My name is Ryan, and today we are joined by Tony,
Hello there.
Ricky,
Hello.
and always last but never least, Ron.
Oh, no. Greetings and salutations, fellow senators. We miss you, Chancellor.
I always like to have Ron's there at the end. So we are recording this on Saturday, May 6th, or as people like to call it, Revenge of the 6th. Or is it Revenge of the 5th? Do we have
I think it's Revenge of the 5th.
There seems like there's an ongoing argument. Is it 6th?
It's Star Wars week, so.
I go by 5th, but for the sake of the podcast, it's Revenge of the 6th. So today's episode was thrown together pretty quickly because some of our spouses just happened to be at work, and we got bored and decided to do an episode, as all, middle-aged Star Wars fans like to do. And what is the best way to spend an hour or so talking about Star Wars? Well, how about everyone's favorite topic of The Last Jedi? So now with the introduction out of the way, The Last Jedi was released December 15th, 2007, and is still a daily discussion in all Star Wars threads and comics. And we are here today to right those negative injustices. As with all Star Wars, there are some story beats that, as fans, we just have to, let's say, make it work. And The Last Jedi is no different from any one of those. So before we discuss all the hot button issues with The Last Jedi, I just have to know first and foremost, what do we here on the podcast, where do we all stand on The Last Jedi? Is it bussin' or is it bap? Ron, what do you say? Bussin' or bap?
You come to me, bussin' or bap? Which one's good?
Bussin' or bap? Ron? What do you think of The Last Jedi?
You're coming from the original trilogy generation fan here. Bussin' or bap? Bussin'?
Is it mid, Ron? Is the movie mid, or is it?
And I just recently learned to glow up. Bussin' or bap? I don't know which one of those is the hip term or whatever, but it was a Star Wars movie. I enjoyed it. I had no issues with it coming out of the theater. I've had no issues with the rewatches. I've seen the things that are out there, but no, it's whichever one of those is on the good side of things for me. Again, because it was more Star Wars story, and I never thought I was going to get that. So what I saw on the screen, I took it as the Star Wars story that was presented to me because that's how it continued. I never really thought about what it should look like or what it's going to look like or what I wanted it or expected it to look like. I watched it for what it was, soaked it all in, and enjoyed the heck out of it. The 10-year-old in me loved the visuals. The older Star Wars fan in me appreciated the story. It had its heart-wrenching moments and its wait, what moments, much like the Force Awakens, but that was the Star Wars story for me, and I enjoyed it. And I continue to enjoy it.
Right. So just so we're all aware, I wrote that whole intro and when Ron said he was going to be late to the podcast, I was bummed because I wrote that whole thing just so I can say, Ron, is it bussin' or bap?
Well, now you got to clue me in. What the was bussin'? I'm trying to figure out the shortcut for him. And
That sounds like from the 80s or something.
bussin'?
For Ron's monthly lingo learning moment, bussin' is good. Bussin' is good. Bussin's great, man. That's bussin'. When you have a good meal, that's bussin', man. So, and I had to Google one for negative, so I had to pick a good one.
Oh, all right. So telling on yourself. I appreciate that.
Yeah, because I wanted another B. I couldn't be like bussin' and no cap, so I was like, I want a negative. So I went with BAP. So BAP it has several terms, not all of them great, but BAP is generally used for negative. So it's bussin' or BAP. So I just wanted to do that for you, Ron.
So I appreciate that. Yes, the Last Jedi is bussin'.
Okay, Tony, bussin' or BAP?
What? We're sticking with that. Okay.
Just your naming.
Bussin'.
Again, I didn't know what everyone thought of Last Jedi. I didn't know what Ron or Tony thought about the Last Jedi. So I just thought I'd say is it good or bad?
It is good. It's bussin'. This is the first Star Wars movie that when I left the theater, like I was just kind of numb. Like I kind of didn't really know what to think. You know what I mean? It was like, I don't know. Maybe it was just I was getting over, the Luke thing at the end, but I don't know. Like I left and I was just like, I didn't know what the heck, So I probably sat on it for about a week just thinking about it. And then I went back the following weekend and watched it again. And then I really came around. Like by then, I kind of reconciled things in my mind. It was maybe different than what I was expecting or hoping for. And as Ron said, it was, what I was given and what I was presented with. And that's what I needed to work with. To your point, Ryan, that sometimes we need to work on these things. Star Wars is not usually plug and play. Like you just, there's so much history, there's so much story, there's so much that you need to put in. It's kind of like what you bring to it. And The Last Jedi is, in my opinion, the epitome of that for Star Wars. There's just so much going on, so much that's different, so much that you bring to it, and that you need to kind of change your expectations on. And that's basically what my feelings, were on it and have been with it. It's one of the ones that I enjoy for being different and for taking the less obvious path. And that's kind of like the main thing I like about it. That for every character, almost every situation, they take a different path. That if you stop and you actually think about it, it makes sense. It makes sense with what the characters are going through. You may not agree with it, and it may not be what you want, and that goes for me too. There's things that I don't necessarily agree with, and it wouldn't be what I have wanted, what I would have wanted. But if I stop, think about it, yeah, it works. It makes sense, and it's a great movie, and yeah. I mean, I'm on the fan side of the movie.
I'm 100% with you. Where I remember walking out of Last Jedi and just stunned. Like I just felt, I don't know if I felt completed or like, it kind of had that type of ending where it's just like, man, it just feels complete type of thing. And it's just, I didn't know what to think, like positive or negative. I just walked out stunned. Like this was an experience. So, Ricky,
for sure.
Ricky, what side are you on? You yay or nay?
No, dude, it's like no cap, man. It was. I was over here lamping watching it. Yeah, no, I when I walked out of Force Awakens, it took me a minute, and I had to rewatch it again, like the following week at the drive-in, and I'm like, yeah, this is a really cool story. When I walked out of Last Jedi, I'm like, the opening night, I'm like, this is gonna be like the highest regarded movie of Star Wars that they've ever made, because it was like such a masterpiece watching it. And then the next day, I read the online stuff. But like, no, I really watched it. I was like, it was just the perfect movie. It was well written. I knew Carrie Fisher had some hand in writing some of the scenes, and it was just like they did the nods to the old movies and referencing the prequel stuff. I'm like, it was just, it hit all my check marks for me, ticked all my boxes. So, yeah, no, absolutely, like one of the best made Star Wars movies. It's, and Revenge of the Sith is my favorite of all time. I mean, that and New Hope, but I think that and this and are my top three of all time. But yeah, there's so much in there. Like I love when I can just rewatch a movie and catch new things, But yeah, no, I'm totally on board. So.
Yeah. So, and with everybody else, I guess this Positively Star Wars podcast, we are taking the point of view of the positive side, because so many other podcasts have taken the point of view of the negative side. So I felt like if we strictly talk about, I almost like being the naysayers. You hear all this negativity. Well, it's like I said, sometimes we have to make Star Wars work. So we'll try to stick to the big points. Otherwise, I would love to do a 4-hour podcast, but we have stuff to do. I would love to do a part 2 of this, because The Last Jedi is such a great discussion point. And if you haven't noticed, I am definitely on the bussin' side. It is easily in my top 3, and as I mentioned off air, I literally just finished it as I got on the call, and I couldn't fast forward through anything to try to make it because it's such a good story, and I mean I'm just fawning over it. But to get on with it, like I said, we have a list of kind of the big points. So again, this is for all the fans out there who, when you hear people bring up all the negativity because it's the same stuff over and over and over again. Well, here's some talking points about those to maybe help convince some people to spread the good word. It's like, well, you're looking at it too negatively without thinking critically. Like, so
because I feel like everybody talks about the movie, but nobody actually talks about the movie.
yeah, it's like you bring it up and they'll change the topic. Well, what about, it's like, no, focus on this one topic and we'll discuss it to the end type thing. So we'll try to limit these best we can. Cause like I said, The Last Jedi, even the big talking points, there's like 10.
Like I even noticed new stuff the other night when I was watching it. I'm like how have I not watched these like 500 times because they're so new and there's like so much content out now. But like every time, it's.
And honestly, anytime you go back and watch an older Star Wars movies after new content is released, it feels so new. Like with the announcement of Dawn of the Jedi, going back 25,000 years and pretty much feeding off Octo, whatever it is, feeding off that. That's amazing. And then looking at where Rey's story is going next and everything that Finn does, it just feels like the movie and many movies are just totally refreshed. I'm sure Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith was totally different when people watched the Clone Wars. So, and that's what's so great about these movies. You can go back and watch something old after years of new content and they just feel different. So
I want to say something. Tony's thing of coming out of the movie and just sort of stunned, or that first viewing and that first coming out of. Granted, I'm only 10, not even 10, I think, for Empire. But Empire back in the day was kind of the same thing. It was just, what just happened? Because it's that Star Wars storytelling. It was that second movie. It was that my heroes didn't all, wasn't warm and fuzzies at the end. And there were some real moments in that. And this was fitting that mold kind of thing and coming out of it. And I clearly sort of recognized that coming out of that first viewing that, this was going to be that sort of Empire type, that second movie in the story that it was, wait, what did I just see type of movie that it had that, I guess I'm just trying to say it had that Empire feel for me all over again and sort of recognized that and appreciated what it was going for. It was to make you, I don't know if it was to make you think, but it wasn't just a happy and they lived happily ever after type of movie like A New Hope was. It was a continuation of a story, a very real story with some real impact and real moment, character beats and moments for the characters, character growth, all that that goes into this movie.
But just like after Empire Strikes Back, the big question was like, was Darth Vader telling the truth? Was he lying? Like for this one, you have the whole like, was Kylo lying to Rey about her past? It's the same kind of, hits the same beats in different tones. So
yeah. I feel like I could do a whole another episode, another 2 hours on the things that Rian Johnson did good, not just like bonding over it, but like you said, it's teasing into that. The Canto Bite scene is the new Cantina scene. Rey's lightsaber practice mirrors the end. Like there's so many amazing things that it's like I didn't realize things till a year after the movie came out. People were just realizing that Rey's lightsaber practice in Act 2 mirrored the end with Kylo. And that's why it's so great. It took a year for people to realize that. And Rian Johnson wrote it while watching The Force Awakens. So
yeah, and I contend that Empire was not the end all be all greatest Star Wars. Was not seen that way. Soon after it's released, it took time to marinate. It took time to get Return of the Jedi. It took time to get the 3 movies and say which one do you like best out of the 3 for 16 plus years. So that's where Empire got elevated over the course of time.
And I think you had the kids that were little that watched it for the first time, and then they grew up and they were the ones running the fandom. Afterwards.
Well, you as you got older and just I'm true of that being originally true. It just you appreciated the story that was being told, and that's much of what I get out of The Last Jedi is the story aspect of the heavyweightedness of what goes into this, what's transpiring during this movie.
All right. So where do you want to start? Do you want to do?
One of the notes that I hear all the time about is bombers in space. So I feel like a lot of times people say, well, it doesn't make sense that they drop bombs out of those bombers. So it's like, what is I feel like that's a common misconception, where if you look deeper at the scene, there's much more. So, I mean, I don't know what you guys thought specifically about that scene where they're dropping bombs in space, and if it's just people overreacting, or what's your ideas on how
It's just a crazy, beautiful looking. I mean, you got the whole stuff with Paige, and then like it's showing her, it focuses on her eye. She falls down, and then it goes to black. Like and I noticed something when I watched it this past time that I didn't before. Like she like clutches her, the little with the smelt. What was it? The Hazian
The
smelt.
medallion, yeah.
Yeah.
The Hazian smelt.
And then she's like, I gotta do this. I really gotta like save it because they're gonna aim. Because Poe tells her like they're going for the command ship. They're gonna basically destroy everybody. Including her sister. So she's thinking about Rose the whole time. They're like, I really gotta do this and drop these bombs because my sister's gonna die. And I never really noticed that before that she does that. And just that whole sequence of them falling and everything. And she went from like the bottom of the ship to the top because she was the gunner, right, on the bottom.
She's the bottom gunner.
Yeah, she was the bottom gunner, and then that guy ended up getting knocked out on top, whoever that was. But yeah, I mean, I always assumed that those bombs were like some kind of like repulsor thing that shot them down. They weren't actually falling. But
yeah, that's the thing. A lot of people say, well, bombs don't fall in space. Well, if you just
no fire either.
That's the easy thing to say. It's like we're watching a Space Wizard movie. But like, so the bombs are all on rails, So there's 4 bombers. Whenever there's a story on from a certain point of view, one TIE fighter took out 3 bombers. Out of 4 bombers, he took out 3 in one shot. Like where it blew up one and then it blew up another, I was like,
well, but the TIE fighter doesn't take him out. The TIE fighter gets destroyed. The bombs are armed on those guys. That TIE fighter goes flying off. Part of it goes flying off, hits one bomber. That bomber explodes. The shrapnel of it hits the next one, and it's a beautiful visual.
Reaction.
Yeah, it's a chain reaction because they armed a little too soon. Whatever. Just all that goes into it is so powerful, and it really puts the heroes in a moment of, oh no, what's going on, to have that one. I had no issue with bombers in space upon first viewing or any subsequent. It was other people, was talking about it. There was all bombers in space. The slowness of them, to some extent, they seemed. Now that there's only one flying over the dreadnought, why the heck aren't all the other ships attacking it? But we had our fighters or the Resistance had I skew good guy, sorry. We had our fighters and attacking them and protecting the bombers, a la real world, wars type scenario and fighting and structure and all that. No issue with it.
Callie and Poe and everybody out there still fighting.
The visual of it and everything's great. The slow motion aspect, Poe screaming, drop now, Kennedy's trying to save fire, all that goes into it. The only issue I ever, in the theater that I took him to, she's kicking on the rail to get the remote to drop to her, and the remote's dropping, and the remote drops past her head.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, well, she missed it. What? And then she reaches and grabs it. And I'm like, well, there's not enough time for her to catch. That's my hang up. The story, the bombers and everything else. No, but it was that real world sort of physicky aspect, which is funny because everybody gets real world physicky about the bombers. But that's the part that I had to hang up the biggest, was her reaching to catch that remote in air. He was going for the suspense and the drama of it all, but I see it when you watch it and see it fall past her face at the same level she is falling, whatever rate, and she's not moving at that point, but then she does move and catches it. It's like, wow, okay, that was tough. But yeah, bombers in space was a great way to destroy that dreadnought. You even jumped ahead of that, but you're going for the bomber. Poe and his delay and BB-8 and punch it, and whoa, that's got a kick, and him flying, the 10-year and taking out he's not going for he's going for the dreadnought. He's like, oh, well, he's a fool, and he's like, oh, he's not trying to attack us, he's going after our surface cannons. We should have launched our ships about 5 bloody minutes ago. Oh, he's flying around destroying cannons. The 10-year-old Star Wars fan in me just loved it. That was awesome. And it still is recent rewatch in preparation for this. Love that scene. Absolutely love him flying around, destroying things.
Like Revenge of the Sith, like the opening is like my favorite opening from all the movies. But I think this is like close because there's like so much that goes on, and it looks like so awesome, and there's so much starfighting, and so I love the whole sequence with BB-8 sticking his head in there. It's like, being a little.
Kennedy is awesome. He's great. The book explores that more, where he says 5 bloody minutes ago, in the book, it talks about him asking Hux, like, we should launch TIE fighters. And Hux is like, nah, we're good. It's only a single fighter. We're fine. And then when he gets on screen and he's like, launch the TIE fighters. And he's like, should have launched them 5 minutes ago. It's in the book. He suggested we should have launched them 5 minutes ago.
5 minutes ago. Oh yeah, I love Fire on the Base. His that actor's portrayal of let's make this happen. I just love that. That's a great line, and the way he gives it. Yeah, love it.
So, well, as far as the bombers, they're on rails. So I mean,
yeah,
bombs dropping in space. We also have bombs in Empire Strikes Back, where they drop them on all the asteroids to try to get Han out. And they drop
Ryan, that's beautiful. I've never heard that counter before, or never thought of that counter before. But exactly, no one goes on about TIE bombers dropping bombs on asteroids with no gravitational field whatsoever. So we call them TIE bombers. We think they're bombing the asteroids. We just accept that they're dropping bombs in the traditional sense of World War II movies dropping bombs. That no, they had to be also propelled on a rail, some sort of way to be dropped into that space. So yeah, that's a wonderful counter.
Yeah, so we see all these bombs. They're dangling on rails. The rails launch them down, and in space, once you have that momentum, the bombs are just going to travel straight in that direction. So it's like
Jango drops bombs too in episode 2. Like he throws those seismic charge bombs out.
Yeah,
but he just sort of drops them behind him, like he just sort of like dumping the trash, right? He doesn't actually drop them. Not like the TIE bombers. The TIE bombers is a wonderful concept. I honestly have never really thought of or heard before in any way shape to the bomber. The slowness of the bombers flying in space. I mean, they are massive. Why do they need to fly slow? That is a bit of a visual aspect, but again, lining up your target and all that sort of stuff needs to be a part of their course of flight, right? That they're taking so that they hit their target. If they're going super fast, it's going to be hard to drop them. Although the Dreadnought's huge, so you could have sped them up to whatever their max speed was, because it doesn't matter where you drop those bombs on that Dreadnought, you were going to hit that thing. That thing is a massive ship.
Yeah. So I just feel like that was one of the points that I felt like people were kind of, as you're probably hearing me say many times, grasping at straws. They're just bombs. They're on rails. We found out what makes it work, and we'll just moving on. So, but for the people that have problems with bombers, there you go. We got all these talking points. So the other big thing, and again, this is jumping. We can talk so much about this movie, but just the big points. So Luke throwing his saber. That was a huge problem with much of the fan base. And again, with me, it was shocking. And I watched The Last Jedi by myself with my spouse. And when I went back a second time, I took the kids. So I watched my kids watch the movie to see what a real reaction is without outside influence and stuff like that. And they were stunned, type of thing. But as far as Luke throwing the saber, it wasn't until afterwards that I realized, and people brought this up, I don't even have a good memory, let alone a photogenic memory. But when people brought up the last thing Luke Skywalker ever does in the movies is throw a lightsaber in Return of the Jedi. He throws his lightsaber. We have a 30-year gap, all sorts of adventures that happens. The first time Luke Skywalker appears in movies again, he throws his lightsaber. So I never understood why it was like a problem. I get it. There's this whole story behind Luke, and Luke's going to be a huge talking point. I'll try to group up a lot of things, but Luke is so big, we're going to have to separate his story between pretty much the phases of the movie.
I just thought it was funny, like watching the first time, like that's such a Mark Hamill thing. Like she goes all that way to travel, and then he's like, and then throws. I just thought it was like a great movie moment and just kind of hilarious.
Yeah, and it was completely unexpected. I mean, if they had asked any of us, what do you think? Nobody, I think any of us or even anybody would have thought that he would have thrown it, And I like that he took kind of like that power of what that saber stands for, and I think it means more to us, the audience, than it does to them. That they're there in world. Rey is kind of like us. Somebody who just lapped up all the stories that were told, all the legend, and we build all these things to be mythical. And Luke, who was the heir to that saber,
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, meh, I don't care about this anymore. That doesn't mean anything. That's not the Force. That's
That
not,
lightsaber's cursed, anyways.
yeah, you know what I mean? So it's like, and I love that, because who would have thought that would have been his, of all people's, reaction to that, to something that he thought was lost, probably, for the longest time. And all of a sudden this girl shows up with it, and, rather than it having any kind of power over him, he just chucks it,
Like you say, Tony brings up a very valuable point that we put so much stock in what that scene was going to mean to us as fans. We had 2 years or whatever, that we knew she was there on Ahch-To, handing it to him. How was that going to go? So many of us, everybody had their expectations and had their idea of how that scene was going to play out. For him to grab it in both hands, review it, look at it, take in that situation of who this stranger is in front of him, whether it's a stranger or not at that point in time. But then, just toss it over his shoulder. Like you say, no one really expected that aspect of it. But it's in looking at it in retrospect and thinking about it a lot, not so much at that point in time in the movie. For me, at the point in time in the movie first viewing, it was, oh, okay, what's he going with here? Well, I was not didn't really expect or think that was going to happen, but okay, yeah, him walking away, what's he going to be trying to tell her, type of thing. But in looking at it, it's such a powerful, because it's removing that the lightsaber is the important part of all of this, like Tony said. To me, the throwing it away argument of Luke would never toss a saber away, he didn't. I still contend Luke knew exactly what he was doing, because if he wanted to throw it away, if he wanted to toss it over his shoulder, he could have pitched it off the cliff.
Or
you see where it lands, another bit of toss, and it's lost. I don't want to say forever, but it's lost a lot harder to find than it was. I contend he tosses it in the perfect manner to see her reaction, to see what this person in front of him does. That he didn't toss it away over the cliff. He tossed it to a point where it landed behind him and could be retrieved. How's this person going to react? Because I'm sure they were expecting, oh, thank you, this is great, my lightsaber, where'd you find it, tell me all about it, how can I help, whatever that was. And that's not what that person in front of him got. So it's a bit of a test. It's a bit of Luke. We find out more where Luke's stance is with the Force and everything else. It's also a bit of him tossing it away because he wants no part of it. But I still contend he doesn't truly toss it away to go away, or he would have tossed it over the cliff.
He's trying to teach a lesson, because that's
at this point, not yet though. He doesn't know what she's there for, what she's going on, but he's trying to measure this person that found him where he didn't want to be found. He doesn't know she's with Leia. He doesn't know anything about her. He's not connected with the Force, so he knows nothing about what's going on. But this person found him in a place he didn't want to be found, presenting him with his lightsaber. So he's not at the point necessarily of teaching a lesson, but he is at the point of still, some finding out some further information. And that is wonderfully powerful in his character growth, if you will, his evolution while on Ahch-To, and getting Rey to where she needs to be and learning what she needs to learn.
Well, and then the whole thing, we've seen it in other Star Wars things where like a lightsaber doesn't make you a Jedi, there's other aspects to it. And this is a guy that was fighting the Emperor of the Universe or Galaxy and Darth Vader, and what does he do? He puts down his lightsaber and he's like, no, I'm not going to fight you. I'm a Jedi like my father. I'm not going to be the one that attacks. I'm going to use, passive, he's pacifist. He doesn't want to be that warrior that walks out there and just like he says, you think I was going to take my laser sword and just take down the First Order? No, there's other methods of winning. You don't have to go out there and be a warrior,
And I think you made me think of something, Ron, and it's a really good point where it's Luke consistently throughout the movie says he's done. He doesn't want anything to do. He's quit. But when it comes down to it, he doesn't really feel like that. He could have thrown the saber across the world with his amazing Force powers, but he threw it, but not with all his heart.
He's trying to convince himself, I think,
It 100% proves that when it's time for him to really prove that he doesn't care anymore, when it's time to burn down the tree, and he goes to burn it down and he realizes he can't. Like, he wants to commit, he wants to leave it all behind, that type of thing, but he truly can't. And then Yoda's like, lightning bolt, and there for him. But
we don't need these.
an excellent kind of point that you brought up, Ron. It's just like, well, I don't think it was a training thing. It was just, I don't think his heart, he may be saying it, but his heart doesn't mean it. So he just kind of sort of tossed it. And he was like, I'm going to burn down this tree. You going to stop me? Or what are you going to do? And it's just, I can't do it. So
how awesome was those porgs looking at that lightsaber? He puts his eye in the part.
Terrifying.
I'll contend too. Hamill's portrayal in that scene, well, the whole damn movie, honestly.
Yeah,
granted, I'm a homer for the movie. I'm a homer for Hamill and all that. But his acting in this movie, especially when you sort of counter it with his sort of, he wasn't too keen on where they took the character or whatever. But he puts that aside and acts the hell out of the scenes that they put in front of him, and the dialogue and the emotions and everything. His portrayal in this movie, his acting in this movie, really, I really enjoyed the heck out of it. I think he put quite an unheralded performance. Yeah. Everybody sees him as Luke, and that's the challenge for it. But I really appreciated Hamill's portrayal of Luke Skywalker in this movie, in that moment, and in the future moments coming.
And I was a big proponent. I was quite upset when Mark Hamill wasn't nominated for Best Supporting Actor, because I'm just like, he was amazing.
Well, I think he shot himself in the foot a little bit and kind of soured it, but yeah, he should have. He should have.
I cannot take my eyes off Adam Driver or Mark Hamill. They both give performances of their lives, directed by Rian Johnson. Like, you don't get to see Mark Hamill with that deep of emotion. Like, it's such a great character arc.
I want to see them in a murder mystery. I want to see them in one of the Glass Onion movies.
Yeah, he'd be really silly, kind of like Captain America. He kind of played like a villain, but this was true deep emotion. And the only way you can reach that emotion is if you have a character that experienced failure and wanted to give up. And that's the only way he was able to access it, is because that's how the story was written. So
when another thing, people were like, "Oh, he went there to die. He wanted to kill himself." Like, no, he didn't. He just wanted to take himself off the chessboard. He was like, "I'm just gonna." Same kind of like Yoda. He's like, Yoda really didn't have a plan. He just went to Dagobah which is weird why people have such an issue with Luke retreating to Ahch-To, because
where do you think
Kenobi and Yoda did the same thing, like they failed.
Yeah, they wanted Luke. Yeah, they wanted Luke pulling Star Destroyers out of the sky type of, they built Luke up, and I still contend there's plenty of time. There's enough time between Return of the Jedi and in this era that you could have Luke doing some of that sort of stuff with the remnants of the Empire or something. Some of those stories could be told, or some of that visual, some of that type of thing could be there. You couldn't have the movies go and those characters continuing on or still living. We'd still question and wonder. And like you said, Obi-Wan passes away, Yoda passes away. Granted, they were our first introduction. We didn't have any great weight on them, but now today in 2023, where a fan watches so much of the prequel, the original Clone Wars and everything, Yoda, it could be a character for them. Obi-Wan could Obi-Wan's death in A New Hope, if that's the first time you see that and you're like, wait, we kill him off so early. It's that expectation thing that people were so clamoring for.
People forget we knew nothing about Obi-Wan for like years, till like the 90s, like the late 90s. We knew nothing about him. Like, he was just, we assumed he was a great Jedi. We didn't see anything. It's like you said, now we have, the same Luke in the same role, which George told him one day you're going to be, the old wise Jedi. And like, we have all this backstory for Luke. So yeah, people are going to, expect certain things.
It was tough not to see, and granted, Hamill, the same way. It was tough not to see him flashing around, wielding his lightsaber and saving. But he does at the end kind of do
that's what
that.
Made that so great.
Right. That's what makes that so wonderfully powerful. It didn't have to be swashbuckling and darting all around and doing all of the Yoda versus Dooku type of lightsaber fight or something or whatever.
Which is why I still like the duel on A New Hope. Because everybody they did the whole like fake animated thing of Darth Vader and Obi-Wan on the Death Star like jumping around and chasing down these are two older Jedi and they're dueling, they're not going to be spry like running around like Revenge of the Sith anymore. And that's
Rebels and Obi-Wan versus Maul. It just changed just once they change. So in like you said, Ron, we have 30 years to do whatever, but these real life actors, as proved by Carrie Fisher, aren't going to be around forever. Like they needed to get this story in to finish that, and then they can go back. And 30 years is a huge gap. I mean, look how much Clone Wars they put in 3 years. That's a 3-year gap or something like that, a 2-year gap. They put in 8 seasons, type of thing. So. But
OT to sequel trilogy is 30 years. Return of the Jedi to Force Awakens is on the order of 30 years.
Yeah. Because Kylo wasn't Kylo supposed to be like 35? Right?
Kylo's 29 because he was born 1 year.
Okay.
He's born 1 year after Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why 30 sounded, but it's 30. It's on the order of 30. It's on the order of the high 20s. But anyway, okay, so
there's a bigger gap between those movies than A New Hope and Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah. There's a ton.
So to the point, there's a lot of Luke's story that could be, we could see that swashbuckling. We see him,
which we've seen in Mando
pulling
now.
Star Destroyers out of the sky. We can see Luke doing, there's some way to tell those stories. Unfortunately, it will have to be with it'd have to be with a different actor. You could do him on the de-aging like they're doing for Harrison and Raiders, whatever. But it just, I think let a new actor do that and tell us those stories. But people carry on about that. They can't do that for a Solo and they cry.
You're doing that solely for action scenes, not for story, though. You know what I mean? Like, I think I like the story that we got, like him actually acting and telling something instead of just, let's jump around video.
Well, so you could, a good creative, you could have the action scene, but the story getting to Luke to this a sequel trilogy point, if you will, so to speak. Yeah. Him seeing some things in actions that are taking place, and everyone looking to him like, "Lo, the Jedi are back," or whatever. And seeing how that, I don't want to say sours him, but seeing how that gets him to this point of what's he say? The Jedi were to think they owned the light, that they were whatever his dialogue is. She was like monologuing to her. Anyway,
it's hubris.
Yeah, it's something. There's story in that 30 year so that he doesn't go from Return of the Jedi, because that's what everybody does. They go from Return of the Jedi to the Last Jedi, and those two Lukes don't square. Well, no, there's 30 years in between there. The Luke, again, I don't want to say got soured, but something goes to where he realizes so much was beholden on a single lightsaber, like Tony said, of how much weight was put into this lightsaber by us as fans, by Rey as this character, hearing all those stories. And it's not that the Jedi don't own the Force, they don't own the light. It's understanding and appreciating that aspect, that they were hubris. What the hell does he say? Anyway, the
Force will be free.
So for the sake of time, we'll just have to kind of keep moving on. Again, we could talk about this for 4 hours, but that's a lot of editing for Ricky. So the next kind of big talking point, I guess, would be the floating Leia scene. So
which
that was
I had no problem with. I thought it was awesome. I'm like, we finally get to see her using the Force. Like, I waited like so many years to see Leia use the Force.
2 times before that scene, you see her kind of react in a way before danger happens. When the cannons at the beginning, when they're launching off the planet, when the cannons point at the ship, that's when she looks up that she's in danger, type of thing, before the bombers hit. She senses danger. And just now, right before the other TIE fighters or whatever it is, right before they shoot, she looks up and senses danger. So she's showing that she is attuned to the Force without having to be, I got a lightsaber and watch me do all these flips because I have the Force. It's like,
well, in the other movie, in Force Awakens, she like does the whole Yoda sitting down because he feels a disturbance thing,
Yeah, so she's definitely connected to the Force. And this is just like Leia. People always wanted a Leia scene, and it didn't have to be her back to back with Luke flipping and fighting, Yoda style, to show that her focus was always the Republic and building peace, type of thing.
And the great foreshadowing, when she's floating to the ship, she goes through Snoke's ship and cuts it in half of the hologram, which is like, that happens later in the movie. Like, I always think that's awesome that they did that.
One of my attaboys for Rian Johnson, because it's just like, that's amazing. Nobody sees that.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you know what? That kind of reminds me of the Holo maneuver. But as far as Leia in space, I never got it because, like, the negativity, because she's going to die. Like, that's the thing.
She's so strong in the Force that she stayed alive. Yeah.
It's fight or flight. And when you're about to die and it's everything you got, to just reach out and just pull yourself through empty space, she isn't jumping 4 stories like Obi-Wan or plummeting 5 stories, smacking his back and then falling 5 more and then bouncing right back up. She pulled herself through empty space. She gets back on the ship and then she goes in a coma for like the rest of the movie. Like, she isn't some super, she doesn't, I liked to tease people that, oh, she didn't pull herself to the ship. She pulled the ship to her. And it would just make people more
I didn't
mad.
say the Force wasn't done with her yet. Like, it was just the will of the Force that she.
I like that, Ryan. She pulls the ship to her.
Yeah.
that is a good one. Kylo's not indecision, but previously he talked. Snoke's giving him grief, and he's like, I killed Han Solo when the time was. I didn't hesitate. I just made it happen. He's like, yeah, look how it broke you.
Yeah,
but then when it comes time to pull the trigger on Mom, he flinches and he doesn't. And that is such a brief scene, but so wonderfully powerful, just dynamically powerful. But then his wingmen do fire, and to think of what that character, what Kylo thinks at that moment of, oh no, oh wait, whatever. Does Kylo have some play, his Force ability in keeping her safe? Clearly not pulling her to the ship, but those missiles are about to hit. They obviously, Kylo and Mom had a connection right there, and he backs off the trigger. She knows what's about to happen. He knows what's about to happen in terms of what they're targeting. But his wingmen fire. So then he's, oh no, Mom, wait, does he do something to help protect her so she's not blown up in the missiles hitting? But then she's obviously using the Force to pull the ship to her. I'm going to use that from now on, right? To pull the ship to her to bring her back in. The only thing that was visually weird about it is the whole, we just saw Guardians of the Galaxy and it very much looked Mary Poppins-ish.
Yeah, with
that was the weird.
The freezing
that was her stance and everything, and her silhouette and flying through space was a little like we had just sort of seen a visual like that. It seemed to be aping it to some extent or whatever. But what she does in that moment, like you say, the use of the Force to keep herself safe, I've never really thought of Kylo having much of an impact in that till honestly just now, as we discussed this with fellow Star Wars fans, that he could have also been a part of keeping her safe in that, because he didn't pull the trigger. But her pulling the ship to her with the Force, sure, why would she not be able to? She's a twin to Luke, Master Jedi Luke Skywalker. Why wouldn't she be able to do that?
I do like that point, Ron. And again, I never thought of that either, because she's the only one that survives. So as we see with Grogu, he can kind of block Force Blast. Kylo could have easily kind of moved the missiles to the side, but not fully commit it. He's just like, okay, I'm not going to do this. And then at the last second, protected her. She's still sucked out to space. But Rian Johnson has this interesting way of storytelling, kind of back to the remote control thing that you're talking about, where he almost backtracks the story a couple seconds at a time. So it's not a streamlined, straight story. It's like the story, and it's like, we'll take a quick step back. So even though she was sucked out into space, it goes to a different scene for like 5 minutes, and then it goes back to Leia. That doesn't mean she was out in space for 10 or 15 minutes. Like this, if you just cut out that middle scene where it separates those two things and make it immediately, she's only out there for like 10 or 15 seconds. And we see, I think Rebels did it too. Where,
Rebels did a lot.
Yeah, where they're in space. And it was like, okay, but it's animated. So you're like, okay, that's fine. And this is live action, so people are more critical. But like, she was in a coma. She didn't come back like ready to fight. She took a lot of damage.
Yeah.
And with the best healing in the galaxy of Bacta. And she was gone until Luke woke her up using the Force, his connection. So it's like, I never got the super negativity. And like you said, it is a matter of circumstances. We just had Guardians, and it is a comical point, but people just use that as a negative. And I feel like it's just on fish. It's like, okay, yeah, they're both in space. They both kind of fly through. What is your body supposed to do in space? What position do you have? Like, do you want her to stand at?
That's where it becomes problematic, because the body in space, the physics. So again, we discount a lot of real world physics when watching Star Wars, but the body in space probably isn't, because she's you talk about the time lapse or whatever, but she's blown away from the ship. She's pretty far away from where she needs to be, that she's out in space for a long time, in terms of she's got a long flight to get back to the ship. And then even opening the door, wasn't like there was an airlock on the other side. They opened the ship to wide open space. So there is legit some how are we squaring that kind of thing with that scene because of the human body flesh in the space, and then her getting to that airlock or to that door, and then they open it and get her inside, then close it again. There's a whole, but it's force shields.
It was I think it was the visual of it is what bothered people. Not the act. Not the
visual looked funny.
Not that she had the power to do it, but it was just the visual of it is I think what people had a problem with. And I think it was not really anybody's fault, but I mean it's like it's Carrie Fisher, she's a middle older aged woman. 2, she was wearing like a gown. Yeah. And 3, it's like the motion of it, the way it when you put all those 3 things together and the motion of her floating through space, pulling herself. She wasn't just floating or flying, she was pulling herself.
Yeah, she wasn't flying.
Yeah, I think it's like when you put those 3 things together, the visual, I think it didn't make a dynamic or really cool or awesome, force.
Well, and then if she puts both hands out, then they'd say she's Superman. Like it would have been
right,
something
exactly.
else.
Yeah, I thought the same thing, Ricky. I thought the same thing. I was like, well, what if she had put both hands out? I was like, well, then it would have seemed like she was flying, right?
And then if she goes feet first, her dress is over her head. So I mean, you can't do that either.
But I mean, it's like this is one of those things where, like Ryan, you said, you kind of put the work in a little bit. It's like, okay, so she's an older woman floating in space, wearing her gown or whatever. It's not a perfect situation. It's just the situation she was in. So I don't know. How is that supposed to look?
I do have a question.
Crane technique stands and then she floats.
What do we think? Really looking at that scene, what do we think? Poe and them are looking out the window.
They've never seen anything like that.
And before. See her. And Poe cheers. What do they know? Princess Leia or General Leia has the Force. What are they thinking in that moment that she's flying through space? I'm just now realizing that I don't know that they would think she has the Force. She wouldn't necessarily have shown that off. What are they squaring? Right. What are they?
They know by now. I'm sure her family lineage. So it's not that big of a leap to think, wow, she's Force sensitive too, or she can do stuff too.
Well, the first time.
Well, that's true. Rey says, "My sister sent you to Luke," or Leia sent me, or no, she just says Leia. Does she say her sister? Anyway, that's interesting. I know she says Leia.
Yeah,
but I mean, I think in the books, and you guys, I know you guys read the books more than I do at this point, but isn't there's one where, right? I mean, she gets outed that she's Darth Vader's daughter, right?
I think it's in Bloodlines, right?
Bloodlines, that's the one. So I mean, so it's kind of common knowledge that she's the daughter of Darth Vader.
But did anybody know Darth Vader had powers?
Well, I would imagine. I mean, they knew he was a fallen Jedi, so right?
But did they? I don't know. I've never read that book, so I don't really know what the public knew about Vader.
I just kind of assumed people by that point knew the whole story of who Darth Vader was and Anakin Skywalker. It's like I just assumed by that point everybody knows.
Like nobody knew the Emperor had powers, so
they didn't by the time at that point. Didn't they know that he was a Sith? And
no, they'd have to just take Luke's word for it, and I don't think he did any kind of publicity for me. I don't know. Maybe I need to read that.
Well, let's just say that anybody on their side would
know. Yeah.
Would know and believe it. Maybe not like the whole,
they've heard the stories
galaxy,
like Ray did.
But they've heard the stories, and anybody that kind of is in proximity to them.
Well, that's why, like in the end of the movie, when Ray's moving all the rocks, Poe's just looking there like, oh, okay, this is the Force.
This is another one of these people.
Even though you know someone has the Force, it's still amazing to see it. Type of thing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So, and back to what you were saying, Ron, about the doors where she was flying through space and then she opens the door. If you look really, and again, this is like the thing where you got to look really closely. They didn't make it obvious, but she flies past another airlock. So it's a double airlock system. Mm-hmm. There's another door there. The door closes behind her because even when it looks through the window when she falls out, there's a closed door at her back. So, and that's what that air rush is because it's pressurized between the two doors now. So it doesn't open the door to space. One closes behind her, and then the door opens up for Poe. So there is a door behind her.
Because otherwise, when Poe opened the door, they all would have been sucked out into.
I'll rewatch that one again.
You'll notice if you look at her back, like when she falls out or something, there's a closed door behind her. So it's definitely a double airlock system. Again, Ryan Johnson definitely takes some steps with the storytelling because he wants to show tension. So there's times where it's like, yeah, you definitely went to the max with tension, and then you got to wind the story back a few seconds to be like, oh, she caught the remote. That tension got you.
So Bean would have cut that remote with the other hand, because in the car, she could flip around and do all that stuff.
The floating Leia scene makes sense when you look at the bigger span of the character. So
watching it, I was just so stoked that she was first time watching. I was so stoked that she was using the Force for on screen that we could see. I deposed none of that. It didn't even get in my head.
Who knows what the 9th movie would have shown? So the world changed, passing of Carrie Fisher. So it's like anything that they could have shown is gone now, and it's all just into fanfic. So on to the next big thing. I feel like lumping Holdo together as a character. So from her taking command, her headbutting with Poe, a lot of people complained about, all the way to her maneuver. So she was, oh man, I don't even know how to say it.
She was supposed to suck. She was supposed to not be a good
You were supposed to hate her.
Yeah, you were supposed to hate her.
I don't feel like that though. I don't feel like we were supposed to like people are targeting her and they go it's like, oh, it's just this purple hair woman that's in command type of thing. And I feel like they go too far with her character where it's like
it'd be the same thing if it was just like, we see it with Imperials all the time. You got the person that doesn't listen. They're like, well, I'm in charge, that's me. It doesn't matter if she's a woman or not. It's just that was the role, and she should have probably been a lot nicer and oh, let's do this, this is what we're doing, everybody, we're going to get on these ships, instead of being so secretive about it.
Maybe
but that was
she
just
worried
her.
Maybe she worried that there was a spy on the ship because they just tracked through hyperspace. So in my mind, it's like maybe she doesn't totally trust everyone. Poe just cost all the bombers, and even though Leia likes him, she's mad at him. Leia slapped him in the face, and I'm sure she went right to Holdo and was like, I can't believe this freaking guy. And now Leia's in a coma, all because of this unfolding. So Holdo's probably of a lifelong friend, which her and Holdo have adventures in it's almost
in the Leia.
And after rewatching The Last Jedi this morning, I am going to read that book because I want to know about their friendship.
I read the first quarter of it. I didn't finish it. But it does have a lot of stuff with them as kids. So.
Yeah, she's probably so mad at him. It's like she's almost dead because of all these actions unfolding because of you. And she didn't slap him. Leia did. She's just like, yeah, you deserve that. And then at the end of the movie, jumping way ahead, she's like, I really do like that guy, type of thing. So it's just like she always kind of trusted him, but she was. I'm holding back my language here, but she was mad.
Captain, not commander. Right?
I know,
because you were demoted.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. When I was watching the movie last night, my feelings about her, I've come around to like her a lot as a character. But as I was watching it last night, what I was thinking is like, oh no, I was like, I'm totally on her side, not Poe's side. Poe's being an ass right now. It's like
he was.
Things are dire at this moment. There's a strict chain of command here. She's at the top of it. So let's fall in, and whatever she says goes. You're kind of a military dude. It's not the time to be screwing around. You know what I mean?
And really, he thought he was going to be next in line to be in charge. He thought he was like, oh, I'm Leia's
sure. There's that look. There's that look when when they're talking about who's next in command. And I don't know if he thought he was next in command, but clearly he wasn't.
I like when the friend guy is like, Poe, when he tells him like, hey, where are you going?
Yeah, but no, I mean she's a great character, and she played it really well, because when
Laura
you
Dern's
first watch
awesome.
it, like we said, she's meant to be kind of a foil and not liked, and you don't know who the hell is this woman, where'd she come from, and how she just stepping in here, why are we supposed to follow her?
And then in the end you find out that she was actually nice.
Yeah, and then at the end,
how do we square her not telling him the plan though?
Yeah. Well, because she shouldn't have to tell him the plan.
He just kind of walk up, kind of arrogant, like, okay, what are we doing? Like, she's like,
he's the main character to us, but in the schema of hierarchy or what's going on there, he's just a flyboy pilot.
Yeah,
but to
in
us,
world, in universe, it's like you fall in line behind whoever the ranking officer is.
Like, what's that Terminator movie where with Christian Bale? Like, we were watching
That's Terminator Salvation.
Salvation. So you would think going in that movie, watching them like, okay, this is John Connor's story. He's a grunt in that movie. Like no one listens to him or anything, because it's not. Yeah. He's not in charge. It's the military. It's kind of the same thing with this.
And then you get up in arms. You're like, well, why isn't he in charge? He's like, well, he's just a kid in this one. he hasn't earned anything yet. You know what I mean? And when you take a step back and you look at it from, outside, it's like, no, you're supposed to fall in line behind Holdo.
And that screen, they show all the bombers are all half the ships, most of the ships are destroyed. Like when Leia's looking at it, she's like, oh, we lost so many people.
And you can just imagine the first thing Leia did is call up her buddy Holdo, and it's like, you would not believe what this flyboy pilot just did. Back in our old days, remember that? And she probably just trash talked him. She's like, I had to demote his butt type of thing. And then she comes up and he's like, what's going on? What's the plan? And she's probably just like, get out of my face. Like, my best friend's in a coma. I don't need your mouth type of thing. And that's the thing. People got so mad that a woman was pretty much taking charge and told Poe to shut up. Like, she's like, just go away. Yes, us as viewers, you could have just easily talked about it. Like, oh, here's the plan. And in the book, it's discussed more that Rose invents the technology for all these shuttles to be invisible to scanners. She makes thrust, because the way that they track ships is they track its like hyperspace and its thruster signal. Rose invents something to block that. That's why later in the movie when they say, oh, we'll use decloaking, it's Rose's invention that caused that. Because of all the situation with Poe and Finn, and again, I don't want to go too much into that. I feel like I can have a whole podcast just on that mistake. Again, this is a movie of failures, of characters learning and growing. But Holdo was just mad at him, and her best friend was in a coma. She's trying to get all this stuff together. She has this guy that keeps pulling on her shirt, like, what's going on? What's going on? And she doesn't know if there's a spy maybe, and it's just like, I'm going to load everyone onto the ships. I know that they have cloaking devices, and we're going to sneak away, and it's going to work.
Like, we're not going to
That's what it is. We as fans, we as movie watchers, we see Poe as a main character. We see Leia as a main. We know Leia as a main character, and we see Holdo as a main character. So why aren't the main characters talking to each other? And that's where we get incensed about why she doesn't tell him. But in the scenario of what's going on there, he's just a flyboy pilot. He's not anything, he's done good things for the Resistance, whatever, but he's not elevated at any status yet. So he does not deserve to, not deserve, but he doesn't, there's just no need for it. It wouldn't, the hierarchy's not there like you guys are saying, but the disconnect or the problem fans have was disjointing or, realizing those two because his main character status in the scenes that we're watching and who he is type of thing, that they elevated Han very quickly and made him a general to lead the ground attack on the shield generator type of thing. We think of Poe in that sense of it, but they haven't done that yet. They haven't gotten to that point of elevating Poe in any way, shape, or form. So that's how you square that, or that's how we can square that easy enough that he's just another pilot. He's one of the ace pilots, but no reason to truly tell him, every nuanced part of the plan. So that makes.
And every time I watch it, I'm like, had they just stayed there on the ship and not done their plan to go do that, like they would have been fine. But no, because all the stuff they do, they ruin the whole thing, and then everybody gets killed because they spill the beans to DJ. Like that's just, it's like it's a movie about failures and how do you learn from it, which Yoda says.
Oh, that's a fascinating piece. You're saying if they don't go to Canto Bight.
Yeah.
He would have just trusted her. They never would have. If Finn would have went there and been like, "Whoa, let's just wait and see what Holdo's gonna do, and we'll work together." He's like, "Yeah, I'm a little bit of hot water," but he's like, "No, let's go. Let's use your plan. Let's do off all this stuff. I don't trust Holdo." If they would have never went, Holdo's plan would have worked. They would have snuck into the ships. They would have got to Canto Bight in secret, and all.
Well, they didn't even have to go. They would have went to that crate.
No,
right?
Yeah, he's saying don't go to Canto Bight at all. Just go to Crate and hide there, and they would
they would have passed on.
Yeah. First Order would have kept following the empty ships and never known that they went down there. The only reason they knew they went down there is, the DJ, the criminal was telling the truth for once. Who would have guessed it? That's the only reason they know.
Yeah, because he's telling them over the speakerphone of where their plan is.
So if they do that squares, that would keep them all safe down there. But what about Rey? Didn't they need to go there to break into what were they going to Canto Bight for? To get the code breaker to get onto Snoke's ship.
They didn't even know Rey was there.
Rey. Why were they trying to get on? Shoot, now I'm rewatching a movie, but
they didn't know Rey was there at all.
Wait, why were they trying to get onto Snoke's ship?
To stop the hyperspace tracking, because Finn and Rose were like.
It was to stop the
right.
tracking them.
They had like 16 seconds or something. They could jump to hyperspace.
Sticking on the Finn was desperately trying to track Rey. How was she going to know where they were, type of thing. But right, they were trying to get on the ship to stop the hyperspace tracking. So if they don't do that, DJ doesn't sell them out, and they get the crate just fine. Yeah, that is interesting. Like you say, a study in character failure, or following that Holdo had it. Holdo had a good plan until it got screwed up.
But that whole thing is kind of like a Star Wars trope in a way. It's like if you go back, like look at in A New Hope, right? Now that we have Rogue One, right? Everything they went through to get the plans to the Death Star, and then the plans. Little did they know that those very plans that all these people died to get were going to end up on the Death Star, right? In R2-D2, like because of Luke and Han, and getting caught and the whole thing. And little did they know that those very plans were actually already on the Death Star, Just like I was thinking that the Holdo and Poe situation and her taking command and it reminded me of when they went to rescue Leia from the Death Star. And then she takes over, right? Because somebody needs to save their skins, right? And she, and she's like, "Well, some rescue." It's kind of like the same thing. Poe has that sort of attitude, that hotshot attitude. Who's this lady? You know what I mean? It's like, I know what I'm doing. But
it's about character growth. Like he goes from not trusting leadership to having to be a member of leadership. So
yeah,
if he would have followed the rules and just trusted them, nothing would have happened. But you can't have side characters just sitting on a ship twiddling their thumbs. So it's like, okay, we got to give them this side thing. It's about so it's brilliant.
But that is a fascinating look at this, how the story transposes, or a what if type of thing. What if they just don't go to Canto Bight and follow Holdo's plans?
Yeah, what happens to Rey?
Because she doesn't have to do the Holdo maneuver.
No.
Right, she gets to escape with them too. The only reason she pulls the Holdo maneuver is because they're attacking the ships, and she's desperate to keep them safe in some fashion to get them to crate. So she gets to escape as well. They all go traipsing off, and the First Order's following empty ships. But right, what happens to Rey? Because Rey, then that's a different story. That's another podcast, Ryan, right? Because then Rey doesn't get the opportunity to escape because Holdo maneuver doesn't happen, in that ship and all that.
So like during the fight,
we gotta save all this speculation for another time, fellas. Because that could be a lot of fun as to what the heck happens. That's a whole different movie, different story there. What's your next talking point, Ryan?
So I'm gonna skip a few here since it's like almost noon here. I had like Rey and Kylo seeing each other, but we'll skip that. Canto Bight, I just like to say Canto Bight is just the new cantina scene. And it had a deeper meaning amongst societal norms and how like the rich gain power. And it had a lot of meaning to the real world. So I respect it on that.
And again, BB-8's mistaken for a slot machine, which is hilarious.
So again, we don't have 4 hours, so unfortunately we'll skip that. But the next big talking point I feel like is Luke flashbacks. Like that, what a storytelling method in Star Wars to see a scene 3 different times from 2 different perspectives. And what I can't stand is a lot of people seems to have stopped watching the scenes after the second flashback.
Yeah.
Thing where it's like Luke tried to kill his nephew. No, he didn't. Did you not watch the third scene? Like what you seen in the second scene is from the point of view from Ben. Ben is being manipulated by the dark side right now. Ben just didn't wake up magically. He was woken up. He would, in my opinion, he was woken up by Snoke or Palpatine or whatever it may be. And like, it was a plan. The whole scene was a plan type of thing where it's Luke senses darkness in Ben, but it's not Ben's darkness. It's put there by another force.
Well, he says he's been noticing things for a while now, and then he gets some kind of vision, and then that's when he goes and confronts him. But then he changes his mind. That's all that happened, and then Kylo goes off for some reason.
And in the book, like the biggest support of my theory in the book, Luke specifically said, even in the movie, he says, like a fleeting shadow, it passes. So Luke doesn't even realize what he's doing. he pulls his light. He has so much focus on Ben at that moment. He doesn't realize that he's pulling his saber in fear, and you see it. And again, this is why I think he deserves like best supporting actor. The fear in his eyes that when he pulls the saber, and then he's like, and it passes. So whatever character you want to use, Snoke or Palpatine, they used all their power just to make Luke light a lightsaber, and then that's all they had. And Luke turned and looked at it like, what did I just do? And Ben wakes up at that moment.
My personal headcanon, I think he saw Kylo kill Han. Because when Chewbacca gets there, he's like, where's Han? You know, the Falcon's here, where's Han? You know, I think he saw that. Like, you know, the bad things that Kylo was going to do, maybe burning down the villages and all that stuff. So he's like, goes in there, because Luke is hasty. Luke was hasty in Empire Strikes Back. He like, I'm going to stop training, I'm going to go run and save my friends at Cloud City. Yoda's like, no, don't go. And then he's like, I'm not going to kill my father. And then he pulls his saber on Vader when he threatens Leia. Like, he's hasty. He has these, like, you know, quick decisions, like, and he shouldn't. But then he ultimately puts the saber down in Return of the Jedi. And he does the same thing here. He's like, I'm going to have to take care of this. And then he's like, wait, I can't, you know, and he turns it off.
I don't even think he goes that far. I just don't think it's his thought at all, because that's a big character thing where it's like, I'm going to light my saber on my nephew. It's like, no, he didn't. He doesn't. Like you said, like a fleeting shadow, it passes, and you see the pain in his eyes. Like, I don't even know what I'm doing. Like, what? He's like, this isn't me. And it wasn't Luke. It was an outside influence, and that outside influence made Ben see the scene differently. That's what like drives me crazy. Yeah. That's why you know it's two different things, because what we see from Ben's point of view didn't actually happen. That's how you know it's an outside influence.
Well, they were both kind of like, because even I when Luke says, you know, like, oh, he was just a frightened little boy. A frightened little boy would not burn down his school and kill everybody and, you know, throw his master's house on. You know, like, he was already corrupted at that point.
Yeah.
To do that, he would have just been like, oh, what are you doing, like, Uncle? You know, no, he didn't. He immediately went to like DEFCON 5 and took everybody out. You know, that's crazy.
Yeah, in my headcanon, like, I think a big number had been done already on Kylo, on Ben rather, at that point.
Yeah.
Like, Snoke was a presence in his life, you know, at that point. And I think much like Sidious, you know, had been working on Anakin, you know, Snoke was doing the same thing with Ben. So that he probably had already planted seeds telling him, you know, at some point, he's going to try to kill you. He's going to realize that you have different thoughts, that you don't see the Force the way he does, and his answer will be to kill you. So you got to be prepared for that. You know, like, and that's kind of my headcanon.
No, Tony's exactly right.
Yeah, that Snoke had been working on him. We didn't see that. We didn't get told all that. Nobody really touched on that. But, I mean, you can kind of put the pieces together, and then based on the way things worked out with Anakin, I think that was the play with Ben. And that's why he reacted the way he did. You know what I mean? It's like he had been warned, watch, Luke's going to try to kill you. The minute he feels that you're not going the way he wants you to, he's going to try to take you out. So you got to be ready for that. And that's exactly what happened. You know, Luke had that moment of hesitation. He had been sensing the darkness growing in Ben. Who knows what else he had seen that he had done. I'm sure he had done, you know, other stuff that, you know, kind of put those.
He's in the back, like killing mice and cats.
yeah, man. You know,
Kylo was brainwashed.
Kylo was
brainwashed. Kylo was turned. Luke even says, you know, I saw that Snoke had turned his heart, and
there you go.
And so there's that brainwashing aspect of trying to, you know, those outside influences steering, you know, Leia and Han have that they're as parents trying to steer him in this direction, but you have your kid being influenced by these other people that because as parent and it rung home for me as a parent with kids trying to steer them in one not steer but trying to go down a path that you think of, but they have all these outside influences, friends, teachers, counselors, whatever, other things that are influencing and having them choose a different path than what yours are. So he has this brainwashing aspect that when he sees it come to fruition in that fleeting moment where, and again, Ryan points out that everyone misses that, and that in the briefest of moments, like a passing shadow, it was so quick. He didn't sit there and really think about killing him. It was just a brief thought of, if I do that. But then in that same moment, in that same instant of having the thought of, well, if I kill him, that ends it all and all that darkness isn't going to happen. He also had the same thought of, okay, yeah, they're not going to, and was left with shame for even having that briefest of moment
for
thought.
having the thought of it.
But just in that moment of having that thought, all that brainwashing comes to fruition that Ben wakes up, and sees that. And the brainwashing kicks into what Tony's points was saying, that what they said has now come true. Your master, your master's trying to, is going to try to kill you, trying to take you, and he's not. He's just trying to look out for what's best for him, and is worried about him and is looking over him. It's his kids, it's his sister's kid. All of that goes into that in that briefest moment. Yeah, everyone looks over that dialogue that this was just the fleetingest of moments to this same sort of scene or whatever, where we see the flashback. I want to pull a Ryan Johnson on you, Ryan, and step back a little bit in the movie, whatever, because that's where Luke reconnects with the Force. Rey is pushing him and is attacking him and challenging him and saying, "Is it true? Did you create Kylo Ren?" And they're having a battle in the rain or whatever, to where Luke is Jedi Master Luke Skywalker and just dodging and parrying all of her staff shots
and
or whatever.
It's angry Rey again.
But she does get the best of him to some extent, or no, he gets the best of her, but she force pulls the lightsaber that's in the area or whatever, and that forces Luke to stumble back or whatever, and that's where he reconnects with the Force. It's a very brief scene, but it's incredibly powerful. I love it to death. That Rey's pulling the lightsaber on Skywalker, who doesn't have any sort of defenses, and he falls back, but he uses the Force. He reconnects with the Force and catches himself. He's sitting there hovering and holding himself before he lets himself down onto the ground, and that's he reconnects with the Force, and then tells the flashback, or then's when we see the flashback of what truly happens in that moment, and his shame, and like you say, his supporting actor nod should have been there, because that scene, how he portrays that, even Adam Driver, whatever, the two of them, but what goes on there, that he looks inside the eyes sleeping mind and sees darkness that is probably, like you said, Tony, put there by Snoke and corrupting his mind, putting things in there, and he's still, what's Rey say, that your failure was that thinking his choice was made for him, and it wasn't. And it wasn't in that, wasn't until that moment comes to fruition. All the brainwashing happens, and he does sort of create Kylo Ren, or the moment he failed him thinking his choice had been made before that point, and it wasn't until that point that all the brainwashing comes to fruition, and thinks he's being attacked by his master, by his uncle, and the shame that Luke feels and all of that. Yeah, it's such a misinterpreted, everybody's just upset. Why would Luke try to scene. Yeah, right? It is. It's a very powerful, compelling, wonderful, impactful scene, but everybody just goes, "Oh my, Luke's trying to kill his nephew. He would never do that." And totally look past.
He wouldn't never do that. That's why he didn't.
He didn't. You're right, exactly. Totally look past all the impactful storytelling that's a part of that scene, and what goes on.
They're putting you in Luke's flashback, mind.
Yeah, in Luke's flashback there. That's a wonderful part of the movie, again, because of how Rey challenges Luke, questions Luke, and gets Luke to admit to it, but also to reconnect with the Force and see.
Ron, I want to ask you, having now you rewatching it, like you said, having read Shadow of the Sith now and seeing the interactions in that book with Ben and Luke, like, how much more did that add anything for you to the movie between Luke and Ben?
We need to I don't remember the scenes so much or I don't remember.
I feel like it was any negative. I don't feel like he was being a jerk to him or anything.
No, they were
right,
like,
exactly.
close.
No, he wasn't. It was close. Yeah, it speaks to what Ricky's going for there. It speaks to the power of how close they were, and how how in that
heartbreaking
fleeting
it is,
moment and how shameful Luke felt for even having that thought. But in the same brief as the moments having the thought, he also, squashed such a thought for, felt shame for having such a thought. Now, granted, he's in the room, he does ignite the lightsaber and everything, but it's in flashback. We don't see how quickly it truly happens. It's in him telling the story of the flashback that everyone takes that both flashback scenes is how that's transpiring, but it's how someone's telling of that story and it doesn't really convey how quickly thoughts transpired and pieces were to it, whatever. But yeah, it's very heartbreaking because again, that's it's his nephew, it's his sister's kid, but I think even Leia says that Snoke already had him.
And that's the tragedy of Ben Solo. He's manipulated his entire life
from
sides because it's just like, you're meant to be this great thing. Look up to your grandfather. But then he always has this voice in his head that's like, you're never going to be good enough. Nothing you do. They don't trust you. I trust you though. And then the scene, his life is manipulated to a point where it crescendos where it's like, see, he pulled a lightsaber on you. I told you this was going to happen. But even Luke was manipulated at that point. And I swear it's in the book. I know I read it somewhere, but I can't seem to find it, that like it took all their strength, all the darkness they had just to move Luke Skywalker's thumb. It's because he was distracted by the thing he loved most was family, and all the power in the universe, all they had was to move his thumb a tiny bit. And that's all they needed. Wake up, Ben, see the image. Everything I've been telling you your life is true. It all falls apart. And it worked.
It's the whole Palpatine, see, the Jedi are taking over and they're not teaching you things, and
that happened. And if you think about it, that's what happened to Anakin.
He's too dangerous to be kept alive. And
against me. It's the tragedy of Anakin. He had this great life, but he wanted to do more. But instead of, Anakin's dreams, in my opinion, were put there by Palpatine. The death of his mother was manipulated, in my opinion, by Palpatine. Like, his life is being manipulated to get what Palpatine wants ultimately, and that's, a powerful user. And that's
you need that manipulation for them so that they, the individual, be it Anakin or be it Ben in this point, will believe it themselves. You just can't tell them and say, "Oh no, come to the dark." You manipulate to a point of when it finally comes true. When you finally see it, I told you, it's the Jedi that are corrupt. It's your master that's trying to kill. When you see that, and you're like,
"See, I told you."
Yeah, see, I told you comes true. But it was all manipulation by the bad guy, if you will, type of thing, whatever. And it is a sort of very powerful real world life lesson for people, for kids, for anyone to learn, whatever, that you're going to have these bad influences telling you these things to even when you might see them come true to some extent or whatever, to not necessarily believe them, to see them for what they really were. And
don't go hanging out with old dudes in robes. Like
there's real world experiences where people do that. They go down that path, and then only after time, only after something, do they see that, oh, I was mistaken. I was down the wrong path. I was misled. That type of thing. Whatever. That's very real world type of part of the wonderful Star Wars storytelling that is sort of is very layered, very deep, very not right in your face in this movie, but it is there when you look at it.
So his school, is that the same place that they're building on Mando? Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you could see the building in the back. You could see that stone building, the one that they were building on Mando, where the little robots were bringing the stone. Yeah, it's those big bricks.
I liked all the trippy stuff in this movie. Like, you had the mirror cave, and then you had the Force link and all that stuff. Like, I like that mystical, aspect of Star Wars. And this movie had a lot of that.
So again, I got to skip over a bunch of stuff, which I hate to because it's so much to fawn over in this movie. And I didn't want to talk only about Luke, but he's the biggest story in this, and the most kind of attacks type of thing. So unfortunately, I got to skip over this stuff again for a time. I'm skipping over my big point of Rey versus Snoke. I'm skipping over. I really didn't want to, but again, I only got like 15 minutes left. The death of Snoke, I got to skip over. There's so much meaning behind that.
Swim.
Yeah, right. That's what it was. skipping over Rose saving Finn. There's so much more, and I'd be happy to do a second thing on The Last Jedi with the kind of the B story. But I feel like the last thing that we should probably close out on is Projection Luke and his death.
Oh,
like,
that's awesome.
people hate it, the death of Luke. Like, this is not the movie of the original trilogy.
How stupid were we watching this the first time, not realizing that Luke's holding the broken saber? You know?
You don't even know it, because
You don't even know
and
that.
that's the direction too, because you
Yeah.
don't notice that, and a lot of people won't. But
And
Luke,
we shouldn't notice it, to be honest.
Yeah.
The
People-
first time I watched it, they showed, what do? They show Kylo's feet make an imprint in the sand.
Yeah.
You see the red, but they show Luke,
And there's
and he
nothing.
moves and he doesn't. And I remember thinking, I didn't think a
You're
whole.
like, they messed up.
No. I didn't think they messed up. But I was like, are they trying to show how Luke is in tune with the Force lighter on his
Floating on
feet,
air.
or they're showing something there that Luke is better at the Force than he is because he didn't mess up the salt, the sand or whatever. I had no idea the projection thing, whatever, and loved it then. Loved watching it now every time since or whatever, because it is such a powerful.
He's
Pardon
doing
my
a
French,
level 100
badass
Jedi move.
Master Jedi. Yeah. Just a powerful Master Jedi move on his nephew, and see you around, kid.
When he bends back, Matrix style, and then the lightsaber goes like that's just, it's cool. Then he spins around. Like there's so much stuff that's cool in that duel.
the shots, the lasers at the beginning, people are like, and then he brushes the dust off his shoulder. People are
And it
like,
looks like blood and guts coming out on the ground. And you're like, he's like, more. And then it's like, yeah.
now he's gonna pick up all these AT-ATs and he's gonna crush them, and it's just like, no, that's not what Luke is. He isn't some god figure. He has an ulterior motive, and the way they take your eyes off the saber is by changing Luke. Because I leaned over to my wife so many times and was like, why did he have time for a shave and a
He
dye?
would just for
That's
men.
that was
Yeah.
exactly.
I
That
was
was
very
my count.
confused by that too. Yep.
I was like, man,
I-
he shaved and he dyed his hair too. I was like, what?
So I never noticed like the footprint stuff. I never noticed
Yeah, me
any
neither.
to like the third viewing, and then someone pointed out, it's like, man, there's so many more smarter people than me. I don't watch scenes, and I don't ask a question why his feet didn't leave a mark. I just accept it. Okay, yeah, his feet didn't leave a mark. I'm wanting to see what happens between Luke and Kylo. But then once you realize and you go to the end of the story, and now you come back for the second viewing, and you're just staring, and you're like, I can't believe I missed.
Yeah.
Stunning. So a lot of people, and again, I feel like this is fan expectations getting out of control. Like you said, we had the biggest cliffhanger in Star Wars history, the only cliffhanger, and we had to wait 2 years to get the story of one of the biggest movies of all time. And it was only like, what's Luke gonna do? Is he gonna go crazy? Is him and Leia gonna team up and all this crazy stuff? And it's like, no, he's stuck on this planet. And it's not really him. Fooled you. Luke did the most Jedi thing possible, and that's sacrifice himself in a peaceful way, just like look what Obi-Wan did. He distracted Darth Vader,
Yeah, so he can get away.
There's
He did the same thing.
yeah, that's why I love Rian Johnson so much, because it's like they say he disrespects the originals, but he pays so much homage.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
If
exactly
you
what
look
happened.
if you look at the history in Star Wars, the most like pivotal or important fights are the kind of the least violent.
Mhm.
You know, like if you look at this one, right, there was no real violence happening because he wasn't even there. If you look at Vader and Obi-Wan on the Death Star, like you said, they were just kind of, going back and forth a little bit, and it was more of a distraction than an actual fight.
Yeah.
If you
And
look at Obi-Wan and Darth Maul's last fight, like it was over really quickly. You know what I
People
mean?
expect this huge battle, and
Yeah.
I must say, when I first watched it, I was like, what the heck is that? And I had to listen to people be like, listen, that's not what this is. And I'm like, okay, you're right. I had my small caveman brain that was like, do battle, throw stuff. And it's like,
Of
no,
course.
there's a story. And I never even seen that. It's like when people broke it down further on that scene, and it's like, no, you see him change his stance to Qui-Gon's stance. And he predicts Maul's movement and takes him in one blow peacefully and then lays him down. It's like, that's the most Jedi thing you could do. Jedi are not like what people
He
think
did
they
the
are.
1-inch punch. Like,
Yeah.
you know.
So in his projection, and people get mad that Luke died. Listen, Luke didn't die in Legends. So there was no way to get fans upset. There's no way to do nothing.
But they killed Chewbacca, which is worse. It made no sense.
I
which
did read
makes
that.
me angry.
They crushed him with the moon.
Yes.
By saving kids. So again, he had a heroic sacrifice type of thing. But this is about moving on. And that's what these movies do. It was about moving on and closing chapters at the same time. So we had to see the passing of all these characters. And Luke Skywalker had to be a Force ghost in the last movie. And to do that, you have to kill him in the second movie. You can't have him die in the 9th movie and then immediately just walk like, oh my God, he's dead. And then ghost Luke be standing there like, what'd I miss? Like, you need a passage of time. So you had to kill Luke. If you didn't expect Luke to die in there, you were crazy. Like, they straight up said, this is the end of all the original characters. So it's like, okay, I want Force Ghost Luke. He needs to die in the second movie. Simple as that. And for him to die peacefully, sacrificing himself and doing what his masters did before him, letting himself go to the Force, after one of the biggest shows of strength in Star Wars history, so much so that not even a droid can tell this projection wasn't alive.
Yeah.
Nobody sees Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn as ghosts. They can hear,
He winks at 3PO, and I think 3PO kind of knows.
Well, that's just Rian Johnson's acknowledgement to say, hey, to show that he's just not a projection of Force Ghost, we need to put a robot in there, because a robot's not going to mistake a projection. What that robot sees is
3PO's has such a confused look in his face though when Luke shows up,
Yeah.
Like he does. He looks like, what? It's not scan. You can tell in his brains like it's not scanning. Like, why is he here? Like, what? Master Luke,
And I think that's the skill of Rian Johnson. You have to say, like, this thing is so powerful and so real, a droid thinks it's real. Kylo thinks it's real. He, for all intents and purposes, he is there.
Like,
He doesn't clash sabers at all. So it's not that he doesn't move anything. He just walks. But even a droid thinks that's a real person in front of me. Then there's a group of people that are like, oh my God, that's Luke Skywalker. Everybody sees this real person. And that's how strong it was. You don't have to pull a Death Star from the sky to be strong in the Force. You can just appear in Force projection. So it's like,
it is powerful, because and I think he's banking on his sort of rage, because Kylo, connected with the Force, doesn't see that it's an anomaly in front of him, right? That he's so focused on that it's Luke that's there in front of him that just took all those laser blasts somehow or whatever. He's like, well, bring me down to him. And Hux is like, focus on the goal, and he throws Hux aside. And the other guy's like, all right, right away, sir. And he comes down and he's like, you here to save me? Did you come here to save me? And Luke's like, no. And and they just square off. That
he went there to save the Resistance.
Kylo is so focused on the Luke in front of him, the challenge, whatever, that he's not seeing in the Force that it's there. Or like you say, Luke is such a master Jedi that his Force projection is so real that even a robot, even a droid sees him as real. Even another Force user sees him as actually there, actually real, whatever, that it's that powerful. And it also, that scene, to what you talked about earlier, Ryan, and the characters and their learning from their mistakes, is where Poe is like, no, he's out there for a reason. Why he's doing this for a reason. And that's where Poe learned, that he's there we got to find some other way out of here, type of thing. And Leia has that moment of seeing Poe get it.
And then Poe repeats what Holdo says. We are the spark that will ignite the rebellion. He does that whole the Holdo says that.
He's like, that's why Luke's out there, kind of thing. To be doing that is it's a lot to it, that it does take multiple viewings and some interpretation and some discussion such as this to sort of get those powerful beats out of what's being portrayed on screen and what's happening on screen, that it's not just a thing. You talked about Luke's death and it having to happen. The one thing that's tough, and I always get that right, how do we square it? Luke projects, but then he's back on Octo. What kills Luke? Why does he die? He didn't die in the fight. Obi-Wan chose to join the Force in that moment for whatever, for some reason, to help Luke on his path, whatever. Why does Luke choose to join the Force in that moment is a tough one, is what we have to square. His Force projection, is that so much that it takes it out of him, or
when Rey and Kylo
Yeah.
are connecting, Kylo tells Rey, "How are you doing this? You know
The effort would kill you. Yeah.
the effort would kill you." So there you go. That's what it was. You know, like
that was definitely put in there to help that aspect
it was the
of it.
effort.
Sure.
That's how I always took it. You know,
Well, no, that's what that line's in there for,
Yeah,
is to help sort of square
and that's
doing
how I
that.
squared it. You know, that it was the effort that killed him. You know, and I mean, if you look at it, holy cow, it's like it was what an effort, right? It's like he wasn't just having a conversation with him. He was, doing matrix moves and, all kinds of stuff.
I mean, if it makes Grogu take a nap just from doing one thing, imagine how much strain this puts.
But there's so I can push too. There is a bit of a Ben sacrifice joining with the Force in front of Luke to get him down his path. That there's a little bit of it takes it out of him, but there's also part of that so that it helps, because she senses what happens to Luke, that he's gone.
Yeah.
And Luke knows that he much like Ben, much like Yoda, whatever, that they can't be around for that. It has to go on to the next, and sees that let this person, let the Force die with me. Let me be the last Jedi, and let it not, whatever it's going to spin up to in its next iteration isn't going to have all the baggage that has come beforehand and had all the various iterations creating the most powerful thing right beneath their eyes, and everything that Luke dialogues about, kind of thing, whatever, that he also accepts his, it chooses to join with the Force in that moment, on top of the Force projecting and what he does and all of that. Takes so much out of him, kind of thing. It's kind of hard to lose
he weakened
Luke
himself to a point where he could do that,
But it needed to happen to some extent. It's that he chooses to happen peacefully there on and why does he need to do it any other? He chooses to die however he wants to, or join with the. I guess Yoda dies of old age. Quite literally, almost, kind of thing, whatever, that Luke still had plenty of life left in him. He didn't need to, but to the extent of this action took a lot out of him.
Well, I also got to think of it from the point of view from a director and writer. Like, you have to kill one of the biggest characters in history.
Right. How are you going to do? Yeah, exactly.
Are you going to kill him like Han Solo? Are you going to have him get sliced in half? Are you going to do that to Luke Skywalker?
Are you going to make him do something no one else can do?
Right. Yes. Have it be his choice. I like it. Right. Have the only way you can kill Luke Skywalker off is have it be his choice.
And remember, he was cut off from the Force for, now revealed, 6 years. And then he comes back and he does the most strongest thing in the galaxy has pretty much seen, type of thing.
Yeah.
So, and we know that the Force takes, energy, because even Yoda does it in Empire Strikes Back. He huffs, or Luke sweats, he's moving stuff. So we know it takes effort. And like you said,
right? Isn't Yoda exasperated when he pulls the X-wing out of the swamp?
He's like,
it does. You're right. It does take energy. It does take some effort. It does take something.
Life Force,
something from it.
He went from sitting on the couch for 6 years to running a 25-mile marathon, and it killed him. It's strange. Like, maybe it didn't kill him.
Human. But I mean, comparing it to Yoda is kind of weird, because Yoda's an alien. Who knows how many hearts he has.
Well, so to say it doesn't kill him, because he's like levitating, whatever, and he collapses, but he does sort of pull himself to see the sunrise.
Yeah.
But right, yeah, exactly, Ricky. Yeah, that he does. It doesn't kill him in the moment.
He gives himself to the Force, kind of.
He gives himself to the Force. That's a beautiful line, right, Ricky? That he's ready to. He rejoin the Force, and he's going to let himself become one with it. He's ready to move on. And
they don't say that they die; they become one with the Force.
Yeah, he chooses. He's seen that life becomes. He's done what he needed to. Yeah. So it is. It takes a lot. He just. To the fan, that's just like, oh, he just he gave up or whatever. But yeah, to have this sort of thought about what transpires in that scene.
And he didn't have a violent death. You don't see Luke Skywalker getting stabbed in the gut. You don't see him getting beheaded.
That's Ryan's point. To a writer's record, you couldn't do that. Luke can't have the falling on. It had to be the character's choice, and that's what it was. He chose. He was ready to become one with the Force. He reconnected, retuned with the Force. And
we don't see Obi-Wan's torso lopped off and rolling down the hall of the Death Star.
Yeah,
Yeah.
again, his choice.
He
chose
disappears before the saber even gets to him.
to join the Force in that moment, so that because it's inevitable, you have to join the Force. Luminous beings are we. We have to. So he chose to in that moment in order to help.
And I don't
It
in the
goes on, and
theater
Luke does the same.
when he does like disappear and you see the robe, I'm like, yes, Luke Force Ghost in the next movie. I was just happy. Like I always wanted to see Luke Force Ghost.
I even had the thought that it's been a long time now, but I remember at the beginning, like when I first saw it and I was first thinking about this, I kind of kept thinking that somehow Luke was going to come back. Like that Luke would be the first Jedi or the first one that we saw that would go join the Force, but would come back.
That would be able to return.
Almost like Gandalf in the Lord of the Rings. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Because remember,
I kind of had a feeling that would happen, and didn't obviously, but
I had a real world aspect that it was Harrison's first movie, Luke was the second, and Leia was going to be in the third. That the characters couldn't go on forever. That their stories needed to end, or were going to end. So they were going to find some ways to tell them. And unfortunately, Carrie's didn't get whatever
she didn't get her finale.
Yeah, she didn't get the story that they wanted for that character, but I think they did well for what they had.
Yeah.
And reusing footage and everything for that next movie. But yeah, it's.
I gotta watch her Walk of Fame thing that happened on May the 4th.
Oh, with her daughter and yeah. I just watched
Ryan, you did say that. I did have a question. I was confused. Initial viewing at the first time of him having a blue lightsaber. And now I'm wondering if I'm conflating my memory or whatever. Was I confused at the time or thinking about it after the fact that I think it would have been a more powerful scene had he had the green lightsaber, and maybe that's what it was. It wasn't necessarily the first viewing. It was just thinking about it after the fact that he should have in that scene had the green lightsaber, but him having the blue lightsaber was Ryan trying to tell us that that's not really Luke there. The just for men dyed beard and haircut was trying to tell us Luke's not there. I'm trying to tell you guys his footprints aren't making footprints in the salt. I'm trying to tell you he really ain't there, but y'all ain't seeing it until until he then just truly pulls the curtain back and shows us, look, damn it, he's not really there. So the blue lightsaber, I really wish there were some behind the scenes interviews towards their discussions about what color saber should he have there in that moment, because I really think
I think in my head the green lightsaber has such a negative connotation to Kylo Ren, to Ben, because that's the saber he drew on him. He didn't want to draw that saber on him again, because he did that in a fleeting moment, when he's ashamed. He's not going to use the lightsaber that he's ashamed of. He's going to use the one that he was noble with and he saved the galaxy with,
Yeah, and people say
there with the green one.
Yeah, people say, well, that lightsaber just blew up. Kylo doesn't know that. He just knows that Rey has the lightsaber, is gone, and now Luke appears with the lightsaber. He doesn't know anything about it. He's just like, okay.
Kylo does. He was there with Rey when they broke it.
But he knocked out though.
Yeah, it blew up. He doesn't know it blew up.
Well, they see it break in half.
Yeah, I see it break in half.
I'm pretty sure that they're still there. Or right, they see it, they're fighting over it, and they break it in half, and that's what knocks them both out.
At that same time, the Holdo maneuver happens. So, yeah, the lightsaber kind of blows up, but so does the entire ship. So it's like everything knocked him out type of thing, and Rey just happened to get up first, picked up the pieces. Kylo wakes up, and he's just like, oh, no, the saber's gone.
No, she killed him.
Yeah, and again, in his haste to fight Luke, if he's not recognizing that Luke is some sort of force projection because he's blinded by his rage of Luke, he ain't recognizing that that's the saber hilt. He's not looking at any of that type of thing to even wait. You shouldn't. How do you have that? We just broke that. I'm confused. Yeah, so he wouldn't be seeing that in that moment at all. But I like what Ricky said about the right. He wouldn't want to challenge Kylo with his green one because that one has some serious connotations to that kid.
I do want to know what happened to his green saber. It's a valid question. Why didn't he have his green one? So we as fans have to say, you know what? Maybe the green one is sitting in, Kylo's house. So if he shows up with the green saber, it's like, you know what? I have that saber on my shelf. Why do you have it? Oh shoot, you're not. So
I want to say that
does Luke have a saber on him?
That's in the book that the caretakers put his saber away with his belongings after, when he was gone. I want to say that I didn't read the book, but I remember somebody mentioning that
When
there's
he's
a
laying out his
passage in the
clothes,
book that
do they show
yeah.
him?
No, it's not there when they.
No.
It's not there when they show it. But right, does he have it?
Yeah, Tony, I
We see
remember
the
that. I kinda remember.
flashbacks.
It
He
is
has it there, but does and Ben collapses the building down on him. Ben wouldn't have necessarily pulled it with him then. How about in the first movie where again it's a flashbacky scene, but we see him with R2 and the burning embers? Is it hooked to his belt or does he have it there? But I
Well, we
kind of
didn't know
would
if he
lean
left it
towards
on
he
the Death
does have
Star.
it. I don't think Kylo would have it. I think it
Yeah.
would be there with him teaching, so he would have it then on Octu. And I could see him dismantling it. He buries he puts his X-Wing in the drink. He could have done something with his lightsaber as well. But if the book mentions his vestments, his clothes, and all his other belongings, and also hides his saber, and then don't they bury his saber? What saber did they bury? His and Leia's.
The blue one.
They bury the blue one in Leia.
Oh, they rebuild the blue one in the last movie. That's right. They fix it, and that's what gets buried.
Man, I want
So
to
yeah,
see
the
that
green
yellow lightsaber. in
Yeah,
action.
the green one's somewhere.
Yeah, I think
Well,
you are.
that's a whole podcast too. Sabers are everywhere. I go crazy about where the heck sabers are because there are scads of saber hilts
Kenobi
scattered.
burying them all over the place.
Yeah, they are. I mean, that's definitely a story.
When I in the comics, that I did see. I remember there was the flashback to right after Order 66, and they were collecting all the lightsabers and they were melting them down.
Yeah.
So all the Order 66
I wonder what happened
ones
to Kyber.
that were in proximity to any clone troopers were collected, and they were taken back and melted down on Coruscant.
But they're easily 5 or 6 out of 10,000. Easily 5 or 6.
For sure, for sure.
They could have been sold for
all of them.
credits. There's always collectors out there. We're told
They were looking for Vader's,
Yeah,
weren't
there
they?
was that. What was his name? The Hutt in the comics that collected the old stuff, and he had a bunch of sabers too. Was it Brocca the Hutt, or I can't remember his name. There was
buff
a
guy?
Hutt. Yeah, the buff one. Didn't he have a bunch of sabers?
Oh yeah.
Wooly the Hutt.
Yeah, the buff Hutt.
The buff.
Yeah, that's what I call them. So
Pack of the Hutt.
I feel like we got to wrap it up, but we had to try to keep it tighter than I wanted to in such a massive movie.
I want to go finish watching it now. I got like half.
You should.
I think we could easily do another 2 hours. I skipped all sorts of other big topics. I skipped all the little topics, everything from Finn and Rose. I picked all my attaboys that I had for Ryan.
And the cave and
So yeah, the cave we didn't touch on because again, this wasn't really an episode just discussing the Last Jedi. This was discussing the main points in the big. Oh yeah, the main
roasted porg.
Oh gosh, that's my favorite scene.
We forgot spinning is a neat trick when Kylo's attacking Leia's ship. Yeah. He spins to fire off on it. And then we also passed over Luke in the Falcon.
Oh gosh, yeah.
With R2, and R2 wakes up and talks to him, and he's like, sorry, and R2's with angry beeps. He's like, hey, Sacred Island, watch the language.
Yeah.
But then nothing's gonna change my mind, and then R2 gives him the help me Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. I mean, come on.
It's not like the highest regarded Star Wars movie. Like this is like the best movie. Like there's so much in this movie. Like I don't understand.
So much good, powerful stuff. I mean, and they don't make it. They're they're so close to turning off the Hosnian smelt and BB-8, and they're ready to turn it all off or whatever, and they don't make it. They get captured, and it's
so much tension.
Yeah, so much tension in this I don't know what's the runtime of this flick. It's over 2 hours. It's one of the longer
almost ones. As long as this meeting we're having.
I did have a thought about Leia's my airlock concern or whatever. The ship is protected by a shield. So when she flies back, I don't know if she escaped the shield and flew back through it, or but the ship is protected by a shield. That could potentially be the second airlock aspect of if they open the one door, or
I kind of remember
the second door, but there is a shield surrounding the ship. So
in that Leia book that we were referencing earlier, they had personal shields on them, on their belts.
That's a little bit.
No,
Yeah, it's kind of weird, but it was in the book.
like
Her and
that.
Bilbo had them.
That was convenient.
Because that,
Yeah.
that's not going. That would be her in space, but that's not going to help when they open the door to the ship. Poe and everybody else is standing there waiting to welcome her back on the ship. They should be everything
gets
sucked
sucked
in.
out.
I mean, it's also in other screen media. Look at Rogue One when, Leia escapes and Vader is standing in
there, yeah.
two stormtroopers, type of thing. And then
Not
we
being
also
sucked.
have,
He's like
Well,
hanging out
but
the
see, they
convertible.
destroy so hold on, but they destroy the hangar. Right. How'd that get through the shield? I guess the ships were inside the shield. They destroy, not the hangar, they destroy the bridge, and Leia and everyone gets sucked out. So there is a getting sucked out aspect to a but maybe the ship does something to protect that area of the ship so that no longer
But
can
then she's
happen.
flying through debris, like when she's floating back to the ship.
yeah. And even I asked this now that I've recently finished Rebels. So, Tony, you finished Rebels, right?
I did, yeah.
Okay, so again, I covered for spoilers for something that's years old, but it's like when Thrawn and Ezra get taken by the space hyper whales, whatever they are, they bust through the windshield and then grab them and then take off into hyperspace. So you're now flying through hyperspace with an open windshield. So it's like these same questions that people bring up in Last Jedi exist in all sorts of media, and that's just one of the things with Star Wars. It's like
somehow Thrawn returned. So
yeah, it's just something weird. Hyperspace doesn't have, and even also in Rebels, they stand like on top of a ship, watching, through hyperspace. And I was like, what is going on?
Yeah, we had our issues with Rebels too, because there was also helicopter lightsabers that we kind of eye rolled big time.
Well, and also just like how did they breathe?
So there are some parts that they go.
How did the crew breathe in the asteroid in Empire Strikes Back? There's no atmosphere there. It's just a rock with the snake in it, and they're like inside the snake, and then
they had their little gas masks.
Well, that's covered in future media. It's a valid question. And in the book, from a certain point of view, they literally a story from the point of view of that worm.
Snake? Oh, really? I was joking.
The way that their society they're pretty much space snails because they live in those rocks. Pretty much their society works is they get a living creature and they change the atmosphere in their gut to hold the living creature, and then all that asteroid field. Asteroid field was full of worms, and they were there to have a meeting to say who had the biggest atmosphere and living cultures inside of their stomach.
Oh my gosh.
I'm not even kidding.
That's why it's in a book.
This is
That's
what
why
happens when people start saying, well, how can they do this? And somebody feels the responsibility to have to explain it, when you don't really need to.
Tony, there is something to it. The Star Wars Card Trader app loves to point out that Hoth was picked because of its proximity to the asteroid field. And every time that little blurb wants to come up in that app, I scoff at it because I'm like, well, that counters against Han being completely surprised that they're near an asteroid field.
Yeah.
It's like, hold on, who's writing this stuff? Because it's not legit fans, because he would know there's an asteroid field near Hoth. He wouldn't be surprised by, wait, we were hit by something. That wasn't no laser blast. That we were hit by something. So yeah, there are problems with some of the various things, like you say, Tony, of if we ask the questions and people give us an answer and then we go, oh, we don't like that answer.
Yeah,
there's a lot to what's being.
Start pulling on strings, the whole story fall apart.
Yeah, exactly. That there's a lot to all of this, and keeping it, as more and more content comes out. Mando's a big one of it because it gets a pass for a lot of the things that it takes advantage of or whatever, that it just, okay, well, like say, stop pulling on some of the strings and just enjoy wearing the sweater.
I give everything a pass because I just love Star Wars. Everything gets a pass for me.
I checked my notes because I made notes in that from a certain point of view book, and the creature is called an exogorth. That stone is a shell, so he is kind of like a snail, and he has a name in the story, and it's, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's like Syo. It's SY-O. So, and he is meeting with a bunch of other exogorths, and once every 1,000 years they meet up, and it's called a clue, a CLEW.
So it wasn't even like an asteroid field; it was a meeting of exogorths.
Exactly. So again,
from a certain point of view,
they're potatoes.
Make it alien. That's why I say embrace the strangeness of space. Not everything has to be bipedal and have two eyes and all this, and they all walk on two legs. Make giant things that even us right now have problems comprehending because it's space. It's a giant creature that a ship just flew in its mouth. Why couldn't it make an atmosphere? Produce oxygen and nitrogen.
Weird
to make
70s and 80s sci-fi.
Yeah.
Yep.
Space. Embrace the weirdness of space. People don't do that enough. So, but again, it's like I feel like we can talk for 2 more hours on The Last Jedi and 1,000 other points, but I feel like it's time to
for
wrap
the
it up.
podcast to end.
Well, one last point. Has anyone ever picked up that in the Snoke room fight against the Praetorian guards that Rey takes on more guards than Kylo?
Yes.
Next time you watch that scene and
realized that last night.
she grabs the saber, or he bisects Snoke or whatever, and Force pulls the saber, and she reaches up and grabs it, and then they look at each other, and then they go hip to hip or back to back or whatever to fight all the Praetorians. She's taken on a hell of more than he is. I forget the numbers, but next time you see that scene or whatever, check that out. That she starts taking on more.
I didn't realize until like last year that she ends up putting that armband on the next movie because she got hit in the arm by the guards.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, slashed.
Yeah, she got slashed.
That's the other thing. The Last Jedi had blood in it. Remember when Hook smacked the ground?
That guy actually broke his nose. That stunt guy. He actually slammed.
Yeah, I've heard that. Every time I see that scene, I think of that stunt guy. The committed to going full face, no hands, no nothing. You were force slammed to the ground, so he literally nose dives onto that and broke his nose.
I think
us to
Finn
be
gets kind of
entertained.
bloodied up too, right?
Who?
Finn does when he's fighting Phasma.
Yeah.
There's like blood coming out of his nose or something.
Or like in the crash. But yeah.
Oh
So,
yeah, maybe wrong.
But yeah,
focus on all the
absolutely
little stuff.
fantastic Senate session talking Star
I
Wars.
love
films.
breaking down the movies.
Just chatting about it
Good
all
time,
is awesome.
guys.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'd be happy to do another one. And
We'll have to do more of these. We can
So-
pick another movie or do part 2 of this one.
Absolutely.
All right, so everyone
or both.
enjoy your Revenge of the Sixth today. So
Yes.
whatever, have a good day.
Same
Go
to
watch
all of
Last
you.
Jedi again.
Yes, definitely recommend it.
All right.
Cheers, everyone.
Until next
All right,
time,
guys,
may the
have a
force
good
be
one
with
next
you.
time.
Goodbye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was busting, yo.
Go switch off. I am the Senate.
Be sure to follow us online. We're at Facebook at PSW Senate. Join our Plus W Star Wars Facebook group where we all are in there interacting. You can find us on Twitter at PSW Senate. On Instagram, we're at PSW Senate Podcast. And on TikTok, we're at PSW Senate Podcast. We look forward to hearing from you.
The Force will be with you, always.
Tony was there for that, but this was the origins, or not the origins, but right, Ricky, this is kind of how the Senate's. I mean, it was still a bit more, way more organized than we used to, but how we just started being a bunch of people chatting about Star Wars or whatever was we just opened up the mics and just talked about things and went down whatever rabbit hole somebody, just wherever we went, and then just like, all right, well, we've been doing this for 2 hours, time to call it quits type of thing, whatever. So yeah, these are some of the funnest Senates, if you will, so to speak, of just chatting, about whatever, of course. We didn't have content. We didn't have any new content to go on.
It wasn't until you guys started recording that we got a little more organized. Because I know when I first joined, it was kind of stream of consciousness,
Yeah, like it was very much stream of consciousness.
Somebody would just start talking about something, and then that would, go off on a different tangent. And we talked for a couple hours.
The first one I joined was like, I was sitting in the parking lot waiting for the barbershop. And then, like, you guys were just on, and I jumped on, and like I started just throwing out Snoke theories, because I think it was after Rogue One came out. So everybody's talking about, I think they had just released the trailer for Last Jedi or something.
Oh, we talked about the Holo maneuver, but what was everybody's reaction in the theater when the Holo maneuver drops and the sound drops out of the theater? Oh, I loved it.
And then afterwards, the theaters had like things posted saying like, there is an audio drop, a moment of silence in the film. It's not a.
I've heard of that. Because I've also.
My theater had that on there. Yeah.
Oh, you saw it for real? Because
they had signs.
Because I hear that one or seen that one post where somebody went and complained because they were mad that the audio couldn't handle this, and didn't recognize that
they thought it dropped out.
Yeah, they thought the speakers clipped and they missed out on something or whatever.
Dead silence in the theater when I watched it. It was awesome.
It's so good. You don't see things like that, and that's because of Rian Johnson. Like, it's an amazing scene. Like, it's art. This you don't see that. It makes a cool sound. It's like.
They put the seismic charges on the.
Hey, I don't know. Ricky's the closest game. I remember when the movie came out, or right before it came out, that there was some game tie-in that had BB-8 in that walker rescuing him, or there was some. Was it?
Oh, on the Star Wars app. I don't think I did it for this one, but for Force Awakens, you could do the little VR thing on the Star Wars app, and it would give you little clues. I remember seeing the BB-8 using the cables. In that app, because you're kind of walking with the Falcon. And Force Awakens, when they go and they tumble around, and he uses those things to stabilize himself. Like, that got spoiled for me in that game. So I think they did do the walker thing in that same app. It was in the Star Wars app. They had a VR thing in there.
But no, there was some video game, and there was another video game tie-in to this movie that was when Luke's putting up his vestments and his clothes and his all his ceremonial robes, and he's folding them real neatly before Rey and Chewie knock on the door and blast the door in. There's a compass, or there's something on his shelf.
Oh yeah, that was on Battlefront 2, the compass.
Okay, there's something on his shelf that would had some sort of video game tie-in of some sorts or whatever. It wasn't spoiler-ish or whatever, but it was.
Yeah, on Battlefront 2, you run around with Lord Santeca and you're trying to find artifacts from Palpatine's old caches. So he's trying to find Jedi relics.
Various things.
Yeah. So, which we see in Shadow of the Sith too. So
I got a dip. You guys can obviously keep talking if you want, but I'm gonna split. So
gorgeous Saturday. Get out of here before I get you. Cheers, fellas.
If there's now too, so
more talking, I'll check it on the after credit scene of the podcast.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
Have a great day, guys.
Good weekend.
Have a bussin' weekend, fellas.